So here on the channel, I've made quite a few videos of connecting a bunch of different electrical devices together. And in those videos, I use the term pigtail. And in some of them, I show exactly how to make them, what they're used for, and then how to connect them. And then in some, I just have used the term pigtail, which has a lot of people asking, what exactly is a pigtail? So in this video, I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to make up pigtails, what they are, and where you might use these. So let's go ahead and jump right in. Let's go. So this is a perfect example of where I would use pigtails. I've got a double gang box here. I've got my feed wire coming in that's going to be supplying the power. So I've got my hot, my neutral, and my ground wire already here in the box. And I want to install two receptacles. Now it doesn't just have to be receptacles. There's numerous places to use pigtails. Light switches are another great instance to use pigtails. But in this case, I want to install a couple of receptacles. So some people argue that you've got these two terminal screws here, and what a lot of people don't know is this little piece of metal that's here. This is actually connecting these two terminals together. If you were to break that off, that's when you would turn an outlet into a switched outlet to where you could operate it with a light switch. But with these two together, when one of these terminal screws is energized, it sends the power onto the other one. So some people argue to just daisy chain the two receptacles together. So in other words, they would have the hot wire connected to one of these terminals. Let's just say this bottom one here. The power is going to feed up to the second one as well, and then connect a wire going from this terminal screw then over to the second receptacle and connect it over here. That way, this receptacle would be receiving the power and then passing it on to the second receptacle. And while that can be done, that is legal to do. It's my experience, and also when I've talked to electricians out in the field and asked them for their opinions on how they connect a couple of receptacles together, or maybe a couple of receptacles, and then they've got another load wire going on down the line for some other receptacles, they oftentimes will say they prefer to use pigtails. And they've given me numerous reasons as to why they prefer pigtailing to daisy chaining, but the biggest reason that I have gotten to why they prefer to pigtail is because if, let's say this is receptacle number 1 and this is receptacle number 2. If the feed is being connected to receptacle number 1, receptacle number 2 is relying upon receptacle number 1 to work. So if one of these was to go bad and they're daisy chained together, there is a possibility that everything down the line, so receptacle number 2, and if there's anything on down the line from receptacle number 2 that's relying on the power from this first receptacle, they're not going to work anymore if receptacle number 1 goes down. So they prefer that everything works independently of each other, so that if receptacle 1 goes down, receptacle 2 and anything on down the line does not go down with it. And yes, I know these two receptacles don't match, but this is a demonstration. So what is a pigtail? Well, this is a pigtail. And a lot of you are saying, no, Adam, that is a piece of wire. And yes, it is a piece of wire. But we use these in order to make our pigtails. This allows us to branch off of this line wire to feed multiple devices. So I'll show you real quick how I make mine. So what I'll do is I'll grab some scrap wire, and then I will just cut them into shorter lengths. Then I just need to remove the wiring from the sheathing. And so there you go, it's just that easy. And so now I've got one set of pigtails for each of my receptacles. Then once I've got them cut down the size, then I just need to strip off the ends. I need to strip from both sides of each of the wires. Of course, the bare copper wire will not have to have any insulation stripped if it's your standard non-metallic wiring. All right, so now that I've got all this made up, what do I do with each of my pigtails? Well, there's a couple of different ways that you can connect everything together. For me personally, oftentimes I find myself, I'm using wire nuts still to connect everything together. I just like the extra surface contact that comes with twisting all of the wires together. But there are quite a few people out there that prefer to use this device right here, and this is called a Wago. So I'll show you how to connect the pigtails on each one of them. With the Wago, there is one thing that I prefer to do that I don't think a lot of people think about, and maybe isn't necessary, but I think works a little bit better. So let's start out with the ground wire. So I'll take my two ground wire pigtails and I'll put them up together. And then I'll put it up next to my ground wire that is coming from my feed wire in the box. And I'll put them all up next to each other. And this is where a lot of debate comes in as to whether or not to pre-twist. I personally prefer to pre-twist. However, on some of the wire nuts that are out there, the packaging will specifically say it's not required. That does not mean that you can't, but it does say that it's not required. And if it does say that it's not required, then you are not required to pre-twist your wires. However, for me and many of electricians I've talked to, I prefer to pre-twist. That way I know that I've got a good bond together with all of my wires before I even put the wire nut on, and I don't have to worry about the wire nut as the sole source of keeping my wires together. Then once I've got my wires twisted together, I just snip off the top and then put my wire nut on and make sure that it's down nice and tight. Hey, really quickly, if you're finding this video to be interesting or informative, if you could do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button right down below, or leave me a comment about what you think so far. It really helps the video out to spread out to other people and hopefully be able to help them out as well. I really appreciate it. Let's get back into it. All right, so now I've got my 2 ground pigtails attached to the ground wire that's coming from the feed wire. So now all of that is attached and I can put that into the back of the box. And then from there, I would just continue the same process like I did with the ground wires by connecting my neutral pigtails to the neutral feed wire, and then followed up by connecting my 2 black pigtails to the black feed wire coming into the box. All right, so now this is all wired up and ready to attach the receptacles. So this is what pigtails are. This is a great example of where pigtails would be used. So I had that 1 feed wire coming in. Obviously, I can't just attach 1 wire to 2 receptacles. So now I've taken that 1 wire and now I have 2 sets of wires. So I've got a ground, a hot, and a neutral over here. And I got a ground, a hot, and a neutral over here. And so now everything is ready to be wired up. But there's another option, which is these Wagos right here. Not everybody likes these, but a lot of people do. They're quite a bit more expensive than wire nuts, but they do also have some benefits of being able to see to make sure that everything is connected properly. And the way that these work is you flip up these levers that are on here, and then you would insert your wire, and in this case a pigtail, into that hole right there. Make sure that it is up where it needs to be in order to be seated properly, which we can verify very easily, and then we can just flip down the lever and now it's stuck in place. So I'm just going to take my other pigtail and put it into this hole over here, flip down the lever. I can see both of my wires are seated properly. So now I've got my 2 pigtails in the Wago. So now all I need to do is connect the last port to the ground wire that's coming from my feed wire. All right, so now all of my ground wires are attached together and I can put them into the back of the box. And again, I'm just going to do the same thing with my neutral pigtails and then attach those to the neutral wire that's coming from the feed wire. And then last but not least, I'll do the exact same thing with the black hot wire, combining all of those hot wires together. All right, so as you can see, I've put my 2 black pigtails in the end ports. I've got the middle port still open, and I actually did that with the other wires as well. But here with these hot wires, I've read this is a better way of doing this, if not the correct way of doing it. And it also makes sense to me to do it this way, to have the 2 pigtails, or in this case, load wires, be on the ends. That way the feed wire, which is supplying the power, is right in the middle. So the power is being evenly distributed. I'm not completely sure that this makes a whole lot of difference. It makes sense that in some ways there could be an advantage to that. If you know the answer to that for sure, do me a big favor and leave it down in the comment section down below. All right, so now all that's left is to insert that last hot wire that's supplying the power into that middle port. All right, so there you go, another way of connecting all the pigtails together. Now again, instead of just having that 1 feed wire, now I've got a set of each. I've got 2 blacks, I've got 2 neutrals, and I've got 2 grounds. And those are essentially what pigtails are and an example of where they can be used. So hopefully this cleared things up about pigtails. They're not just the anatomy of farm animals. They are actually wires that are used in numerous different kinds of applications. And hopefully I was able to show you exactly what they are, what you might use them for, and then how to make them up. If you'd like to see an in-depth demonstration of me using pigtails, I'll post it right over here where you can click on it, where I do an installation using those pigtails. So I hope this was helpful. If it was, please do me a huge favor, hit that thumbs up button right down below. And of course, if you have any questions or comments still, you can leave those down in the comment section. And I'll catch you all in the next one. See ya.